Hi everyone, welcome back to the Law of Attraction podcast. I'm Laura, haven't met me already. I'm your local life coach, and I'm here with Dana from Lightshine Wellness, and she's all the way from Boston. And we got in contact through Instagram, and sort of somehow have managed to kind of develop a bit of a Instagram friendship. But if you'd like to introduce yourself, Dana, tell us a bit about you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. As Laura mentioned, my name is Dana from Lightshine Wellness, and I own a holistic practice with services like Reiki healing, chakra balancing, card readings, and meditation classes. I'm also in the process of putting together a new program for life coaching, which I'm super excited about.
That sounds really cool, and obviously, we've got a lot in common. I think this is kind of where we've somehow managed to kind of get in contact. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
it's something that I've been looking into because I've had a few Reiki treatments, but I'm not a Reiki master or anything like that. So tell me a bit about Reiki because it's quite interesting. If people haven't heard of that before, tell me about
Yeah,
that.
of course, of course. So yeah, I find that a lot of people haven't really heard of it, and if they have, it's just like a very vague concept. So basically, Reiki helps align, center, and balance the energy centers in your body. Because when those centers are off balanced, they can manifest as physical, mental, emotional, spiritual imbalances for the person. So Reiki just kind of aligns and centers and finds those imbalances and helps straighten, align, and perfect those energy centers.
Yeah. So I mean, when you become a master, they give you it's the key, isn't it? Is the energy, the Reiki, and the key is the
Yeah.
energy. So
Hmm.
they give that to you. I had a friend of mine who went and did a course, and she said that she didn't really feel anything, but her partner that she did it with had a really bad kind of physical symptoms after receiving the key. Did you guys? What did you experience with that when you received that?
So it was so crazy. I actually went with a friend of mine, and we had both had Reiki done before. We knew what it was. We just were like, we need to get this. Like this is our path. Like this is what we need to do. So we like took the class, we learned all the things, and then we got attuned. And that was like for me and for her both, it was like an outer body experience. It was like all of the knowledge from like every past Reiki master was just like drawn into like your crown chakra, like your energy center, and it was like an overflow for me. Like I remember my chest was racing and I was like, what's happening? Like what is this feeling? So it's so crazy. I mean, I definitely felt like that rush of like knowledge and energy and like almost like enlightenment almost.
Yeah.
So it was super, super cool. My friend had a very similar, experience, and it's it's something that you can't really describe unless you experience it. And even then, it's kind of difficult because you're like, wait, what just happened to me?
I mean, it sounds really exciting because I've been thinking, oh, I want to go and have it trained to do Reiki. Obviously, I do a lot of healing, and I'm an energy healer myself, so I kind of work with people's energy when I'm doing my coaching as well. But it's something for me. It's kind of I have like a clairsentience. I just know stuff. So that's kind of like what you
Yeah,
were saying, where you get this knowledge of kind of
exactly.
the stuff that you shouldn't really be able to know. Like when I'm coaching people, I know what they're saying before they're saying it, and they're like,
Mhm,
"Did I say
mhm.
something?" You're like, "No, I can just see that this is what's the
No.
issue." But it's do you find that? Do you find that since you've been kind of given the key that you've got like this sort of sixth sense sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've always been very like intuitive with people. Like I've always had very vivid, like prophetic dreams, like
Hmm.
ever since I was super little. It's like crazy. And I never really knew like what it meant for me or like how it made sense in my life until I found Reiki. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh, this is a gift meant to help people.
Yeah.
And it kind of Reiki like enhanced all of those natural intuitive abilities that I've had since I was little. And it basically helps prepare you for when you're treating people because when you do Reiki, it's 90% intuition, I
Mm.
think. You're using your intuition when you're scanning their body, when you're receiving messages from, spirit guides, either theirs or yours, like everyone's trying to help you and you really need to just tune into that intuition in
Mm.
order to connect to like find those imbalances and to correct them for the person.
I mean, when you're doing that scanning process, is it something that's kind of visual, or is it, I know you're saying you're
Yeah.
sort of listening, but I mean, for me,
Yeah.
I have like a knowledge that sort of comes in and it's kind of like a thought, and I know that the thought is right.
Yep.
Sometimes I hear things and things, but if you're scanning somebody's body, do you kind of see something, or do you hear something, or what? How does that process work for you?
Yeah, so at first, it's a lot of trust in yourself,
Yeah.
and I didn't have that when I first started Reiki. I was like, "What am I doing with my hands? Like, am I doing this right?" And then, like, as you said, like, a thought popped in my head, and I'm like, "Oh, this person is thinking of bumblebees or something," and I'm like, "That's a strange thing." And then another thought popped in my head, and it's like, "Tell them about the bumblebees." I'm like, "Okay." So I'm like, "I'm seeing bumblebees," and the girl was like, "I've been having nightmares that bees are stinging my neck." I'm like,
Oh,
"Okay, so weird. Love that."
yeah. I mean, it is really weird. I mean, what's the reception been for you? Because for me, I know that I'm a bit of an oddity among my friends and among society.
Yeah,
Do you find that difficult, kind of walking this path?
definitely. I mean, a lot of people when they come for Reiki, they're ready for it and they're open to it.
Mm.
But I've had a number of clients that were referred to me by a doctor or by a friend, and they're like, "Well, I don't believe in this stuff, but I'm willing to try it because I'm in pain." And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Okay, well, that's okay because you made it here, so that's the first step." So I'm just like, relax and like have a seat. And I think that once people experience it and like really like feel the energy and the shift,
yeah.
that's when you're like, "Oh my god, I don't know what you did, but it worked." And that's kind of where the belief happens. So I just try to tell everyone, I just want you to be open minded. I
Mm,
just want you to be relaxed and think of it as like a nap. Like you're just here to relax. You're just here to chill.
mm.
It's just like meditating.
I mean, it's really interesting. I think in this day and age, like, people are coming more receptive to it. And obviously, we've got like the Great Conjunction coming up in
Mhm.
December, which you're probably aware of. And we're moving into kind of air signs. So hopefully, kind of people are, which is ruled by I'm an Aquarius, so it kind of makes sense. But we're moving into hopefully an age where people are a little bit more receptive to the esoteric.
Agree.
But I find that it is a difficult path to walk sometimes, and I know that
Yeah.
I'm a lecturer and a life coach, and I know that if I'm at a dinner party, probably the first thing I'm going to describe myself as is a lecturer rather than an intuitive life coach that kind of knows stuff, sees stuff. Because people would just be like, "What?" Do you know what I mean? Like crazy red hair, it's enough for people to kind of deal with and kind of hearing your differences. But I think that what's really wonderful is that the internet's kind of brought in this community for people where we can kind of find people,
Yeah.
obviously, like you and I. I
Yeah.
mean, are you the only person in your family to kind of be walking this pathway? Have you really sort of started as a trailblazer?
In my immediate family, yes, but my godmother was a Reiki master, and it's crazy because she was trying to get me to get attuned, and she wanted to, be my Reiki master and teach me Reiki. She was like, "You're so intuitive." Obviously, as my godmother, she's been around my whole life. She was like a second mom to me. So
Yeah.
she was like, "You would be so good at this."
Mm.
She actually ended up passing away the summer before the fall we were supposed to have class together.
Oh.
So I think with her passing, along with another series of crazy life events for myself, that's kind of what drove me into like the holistic healing and like new age like path for
Mm.
me. I mean, as soon as she passed, I immediately started to become like intrigued with like crystals and astrology.
Hmm.
I started studying and reading and just like experimenting, going to crystal stores and
Mm.
reading about tarot cards and stuff. And her passing kind of like ignited my passion for this.
Mm.
So, and I mean, it's kind of crazy how she was so good at this. It's so good at helping people. I mean, it's sad, but it took her passing for me to be like, "Oh my gosh, I need to do this too."
Yeah, but you're her legacy now, aren't you? It's kind of sometimes it takes these traumatic incidences to push us into the pathways that we're supposed to be. And I always think that she of course had a hand to play in the process that you've kind of gone through. And I've got a friend of mine whose mother passed away, and he's going through this great loads of wonderful things happening to him at the moment. And I just said to him, "You do realize that none of this is you, don't you?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm fully aware it's mum, thank you." you know
Yeah.
but it's like it's a really interesting sort of process. And I think we a lot of people kind of they think of themselves as this insular thing, that they're just, you know, that you're just Dana, just Laura, and that there isn't this lineage, that there's not this great grand queue of people that kind of stood behind you, you know. And I think that, you know, when you say talking to spirits, guides, and ancestors, I mean, what's your experience of talking to spirit? Because I mean, I've talked to spirit, but I've never kind of recognized it as spirit. I've kind of just thought, oh, it's my intuition. When I was younger, I just thought it was like intuition. And
Right.
as I've grown older, I'm kind of recognizing that it's not really me. It's like there's somebody else's kind of input, you know. How did you kind of get in touch with your spirit guides? Like, if somebody wanted to, say, if somebody wasn't, you know, attuned or kind of in tune with that kind of field, what kind of recommendations would you give to people to kind of a become a bit more open to it, and b maybe try and hear your spirit guides better?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of tricky. I think before I was attuned, I was super skeptical of the ideas in my head. I weren't sure if they were my intuition or my fear, or
Mm,
or a spirit guide. Honestly, I think that it was really difficult for me to decipher between the three. I mean, am I thinking of a message from someone? Am I thinking of an intuitive thought about the future, or am I just scared and having this thought? So I feel like really having trust in yourself and trust in your thought process, and also trust in your path. I feel
mm,
like having that self trust will really help you decipher what you're thinking. And especially if you put the two together, if you're thinking, oh, is this a message? Then yes, it's a message. That's how I feel. Because if you're like, oh, I feel like, I don't know, my papa would say something like that to me. Well, then that's from papa. And that's how you're going to get through today because you thought of it. And
yeah.
that's kind of how I like interpret it. And now, I mean, since I've been attuned, it's just, it's a wild ride. I mean, I mean, I don't want to say I talk to spirits, but like I've communicated with spirits during Reiki, and even during some of my like tarot or card readings that I have. It's like, this is a crazy experience. And this happens over the summer. I was doing a reading for a friend. Her grandmother had just passed. I
Mm.
did this whole like spread for her. We were going through it all. And all of a sudden, it's like I had left the room. Don't know where I went or what happened, but I was gone. And her grandmother like just spoke through me.
Wow.
And I like just gave her this little bit of advice and like this blurb of, I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you what I told her because I can't. I wasn't here. And then I like snapped back and I was like, what did I just say to you? And she's like, Dana, I think my grandma was just here because she like whatever you said sounded just like what she would tell me. And so she started crying and I was like, I'm sorry. And she's like, no, that was amazing. And I was like, I don't know what happened. So
Oh my
like
gosh.
those things happen.
Yeah.
It's just it's so crazy. It's so exciting. I get so fired up about this stuff because
No, it's cool. I
I
love
love
it. No, I completely agree. I agree with you. I mean, I've always been the weirdo. Since I was a kid, you know, I've always been able to know who was ringing, when the phone was going to ring. Like, I've
uh-huh.
always been able to hear my mum if she's thinking about me. I'm like, I'll ring her up. Like, I was living in a different country there at one point. I'll ring her up and like, what do you want? I can hear you in my head. And she's like, I'm sorry, I was just thinking about you. And I will stop it because you're disturbing me, you know? Because
That's
I'm
going to
thinking,
sleep.
yeah, it's like if you can hear somebody, it's like, well, I've got to check it out because it might be
Of
something, you know.
course.
But normally she's just thinking, oh, I forgot to tell you something, you know. And I
Mhm.
tell this to people, and they think you're mad, and it's like, I
Of
don't really
course.
care. Let people think, you know, let people judge. But
Exactly.
it is difficult, I think, sometimes kind of going through the process of walking the path, and I think it's a really nice thing to think that, you know, I mean, I can't explain it. This is the problem. I think that sometimes when we're thinking about kind of the spiritual work, that kind of things that we do, I can't explain it to people. And I think that's what makes it very difficult because I can't, you know, like I do tarot readings and things, and my partner's quite skeptical of this sort of stuff. He's not particularly spiritual. He's very kind of, if anything, kind of leaning towards atheist agnostic, but probably more on the atheist side. And I'll
Mhm.
be doing tarot readings, and I'm like, right, look, it's like the message comes out and I'll go,
Right.
okay, right, you know, King of Swords just popped out. Okay, I'm going to put that back in the pot and I'm going to shuffle again, and then boom, King of
And then
Swords
here it
pops
is
back
again.
out again. I'm like,
Yeah.
there's 72 cards in here. They're all bloody different. What's the chance of that happening? And he's like, okay, 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 you know. But it's like people that kind of aren't with this, I think they find it really difficult to understand, and particularly
Yeah.
when people who are with it, we can't really explain it. Makes it
Right.
even more difficult. I mean, do you think that if everybody went and got attuned to kind of getting the key and kind of getting attuned into Reiki, do you think that that would help like the world? Because obviously we're going through a great kind of spiritual ascension at the moment, but there's still a lot of people who are asleep. Do you think if this was something that was given out mass to everyone, do you think that that would help the world? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I definitely think that right now the world needs healers. I think that we're all going through all sorts of craziness on a bunch of different levels,
Mm,
And I think that like the world needs healers right now. And as you said, like Aquarius and Capricorn, those we're shifting right now with Saturn and
yeah,
everything. So I feel like now's the time that the shift is going to happen that we need as like a collective, because we need people that are open minded, that are ready for this, that are aware and open to like take that jump, take that leap into into our world,
mm.
really.
Like I've
Um,
seen like a big shift in like just like the normal people, like
yeah,
the normal
absolutely.
people over summer. I've seen a huge shift in a lot of people because I think that I mean, in the UK, we've had sort of lockdown. People have been working from home and stuff,
Yeah,
and I think that people have become very disillusioned with what they thought the world was about. And
right.
actually, that's kind of like the materialist side of things, and going to work and being in part of the rat race. And the people are kind of like, what am I doing? I think a lot of people are setting up
Right.
side hustles and they're looking into how they can make money for themselves and be more independent. And I think
Yeah.
some of that kind of disconnection from society allows people to stop being so normal. Like for me,
Right.
if it would be difficult if I was sacked tomorrow, but it wouldn't be impossible, and it wouldn't scare the hell out of me. So I'm not
Right.
frightened about kind of disassociating from the norms of society. Whereas if you're thinking about, if you think about maybe, I don't know, a bank manager or someone who has to look, not, I mean, I'm a lecturer, so really I'm part of the problem as well. We've got to be this, this, we've got to portray to the world something that maybe we're not feeling internally. But for certain businesses, it's really difficult for them to come out and kind of do their thing and be their thing. And historically,
Right.
it's the creative people, that are, you're an artist or the musician, or whatever, and those people are kind of looked at
Yeah.
as being the free spirits of society. But I think over the last kind of few sort of months, I think people have recognized that really being part of that rat race, and kind of joining in with the social norms doesn't really help in any way, shape, or form for their
No.
lives, and it can fall apart on a turn on a penny, as they say.
Mhm.
Do you think that like if as a collective, do you think that, obviously now we're coming up to the great conjunction, I think we're moving in, I mean, do you think that things are going to change a lot after December 21st? What's your feeling on it? Because I'm feeling quite excited. What do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I know. I mean, obviously, I'm into astrology as well, and
Yeah.
I've read and heard and studied all about what's happening and what's coming. So, I mean, I think that there's some promise, though. I think there's going to be a really big shift in energy, and
Mm,
I really think that that's kind of what we all need right now. I feel like where we've been the past 8, 9 months has been a really dark place for some people.
mm,
And I feel like, as you said, like things can change in a second. And I feel like people are really experiencing that right now, like with their work. And I feel like people's whole perspective has changed really. They're like, I don't really need this job. I can stay home and I can be with my family and I can
mm,
see my, or not see my friends, but just have more me time. And I feel like people are really changing how they see things. And I feel like the shift in energy that's going to happen and the energy coming with 2021 is still going to be difficult for us. I don't think it's
mm.
going to get any easier, honestly,
No.
at all. But I do think that it's going to be refreshing to have that shift in energy and to kind of shift gears and mindsets a little bit moving forward.
Mm. I mean, I think that certainly in 2021, I still think we're going to be dealing with a lot of fall off
Yep.
from this year. I think that I was talking to a client last night. She was like, I just wanted to be fixed for the conjunction. And I was like, babe,
Yeah. No.
it doesn't work that way. I was like, it's like we're in a waiting room at the moment. Once we get
Yeah.
past into the great conjunction, we're in the doctor's office then. It's like,
Right.
that's when the stuff is going on. It's like,
Exactly.
that's when the healing and the full ascension and everything starts to begin. So this is minor what we've gone through this year. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that next year, I think it's going to be more positive, but I think that it's going to still be very difficult to deal with. And I think a lot of people want to kind of go through ascension. I think there's a bit of like, for people who are followers of the path, or interested in the pathway of kind of like light working and so on and so forth, energy healing and things, they're always like, oh, I want to have spiritual ascension. I want to have spiritual ascension. It's like, God, see, you don't know what you're wishing for there. And actually, I think people have kind of recognized a little bit this year the dangers of the wishing for the experience, for that spiritual ascension, because it isn't something. I think people think that it's this kind of like, I'm going to meditate under a body tree. It's going to be really nice. It's going to be really relaxing. It's like, no, you're going to have to fast for 40 days. The devil's going to come and tempt you. There's going to be a flood. You're going to think you're going mad, Did you find that? I mean, is it the same experience when you're receiving kind of like being attuned for Reiki? Is it the same experience as you have with the spiritual ascension? Because I know that when I've gone through spiritual ascensions in my life, I've thought I was losing my mind at points. Other times it's been really, really difficult, very kind of the turmoil before the kind of peace can actually be really difficult to deal with. Well, how did you feel with the attunement?
Absolutely. So with the attunement, obviously at first you're like, whoa, energy. You're just like all about it. You're so excited. And then after a while, like you start practicing, you have all these clients, and then like it kind of ebbs and flows. And you're like, wait a minute, am I doing this right? Like, and then like that burst of energy is gone. And then you're stuck and you're like, oh my God. And you start to self-doubt.
Yeah.
Like, right for me? Did I choose the right path? And there is that like worry and that anxiety of like, is this for me? Like, should I be doing this? And it kind of gets you down, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Is this okay? And then you have like a great session with someone, and then your energy comes back, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is right. This is why I'm doing this. I helped someone today. And I think it definitely kind of comes and goes, but there are definitely times, I mean, I just went through a super, super difficult period of time where I was just like, why am I doing this? Like, I know I'm good at this, but like, if nobody wants it, then why am I doing it? And it's just kind of that like, that torn feeling of wanting to help people, but not knowing like where to go and like what to do, and just feeling really down on yourself sometimes. And I know that that's life. I know that like that's just how we are as humans and as people and as spiritual beings. We also absorb people's energies, so that's really difficult to discern. Like, am I so down because of me, or am I so down because of a client, or because of a friend, or like my mom? Like, is she having a bad day? Like, you never really know. So I think it's just really important to try to stay positive, but also be really present with your feelings, because you should honor your feelings as they come, because you're not going to feel happy all the time, but you're also not going to feel sad all the time.
It's absolutely perfect. I mean, I've literally just recorded a podcast talking about the seasons of ourselves, and people kind of want to stay in summer all the time, but it's unreasonable. It's not a reasonable expectation. And like what you're saying, it's the wheel of life. We go up, we go down, the wheel of fortune in tarot, we go up, we go down. We know that at some point that the season's going to change. And I think that there's kind of the toxic positivity movement that goes alongside with things at the moment. I'm so frustrated by it, because I kind of, with my beginning path into kind of law of attraction, I also kind of went into this with, kind of considering that, oh, my doorbell's going off. This was good, isn't it?
Of course.
I think my partner's getting it. Just cut that bit out. When I started getting into law of attraction, I kind of got into this thing about like, oh, don't have a bad thought. Stay positive, because your mind's more powerful than you think it can be, and I don't want to accidentally manifest anything. And I can remember once so one of my cats went missing. I absolutely adore my cats, and this one time one of my cats went missing, and I was just like, very much thinking like law of attraction, law of attraction. I just have to be thinking about she's going to come home and everything's going to be fine, and she's going to come home. And unfortunately, I found her and she was dead. And this whole thing was so traumatic for me. And it was at the beginning of kind of like when I'd started to see some really big manifesting with some of the things that I've been doing. And I kind of, from that moment, I kind of was thinking like, oh, it's my fault because I'd thought about it, I'd worried about it, I'd kind of manifested the stuff, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And then after that, I just became so paranoid about thinking, an unpositive or a negative thought. And I kind of got stuck into this kind of toxic positivity thing. And I can remember about 10 months later after that happened, the chap that I was seeing broke up with me. And I was like, I'm not even going to think about this. I'm just going to manifest us getting back together and everything's going to be fine. So I didn't tell anybody we'd broken up. I went to go and do went to go and see people at parties and stuff like that. And they're like, oh, how's your partner? I'm like, yeah, he's great. Everything's fine. Just doing this like completely mental toxic positivity thing. And it's and I think that at the moment we've got this kind of thing where people are sort of not happy to recognize that sometimes we're okay to not be happy, and sometimes it's okay to acknowledge that we're on a down cycle. And I think actually one of the beauties almost that has kind of happened in COVID, and I felt that with my own spiritual kind of awareness, and I've seen it with a lot of other people that I'm in touch with that are spiritually attuned, that they've become much more confident, and actually spirit has been pushing them, which I'm mentioning because you may have felt this as well. Spirit has been pushing me to talk about when I'm not feeling good, okay? Because I've had lots of kind of pointers from spirit and from other people where I've recognized that almost sometimes I've accidentally preached toxic positivity, because people they're only seeing kind of what you got on your Facebook and on your Instagram and stuff. And when you're coming and you're saying, oh, be positive, be joyful. And sometimes we're on this path of healing and spirituality, we can accidentally kind of preach this kind of a toxic positivity idea, not from trying, but because we're also not talking about when things go to shit, Exactly. And I don't know whether you felt this, but certainly through lockdown, I felt this really strong urge to be a little bit more authentic at points and to talk more about myself and my experience. And with my coaching business, I'm pretty open, I think, because my pathway sort of started with me healing myself. But have you found that you've been more pushed to want to be more authentic and more honest about the downsides of spirituality and the downsides of working, self-employed and walking this pathway? Because I think a lot of people see us and they're like, you're confident, you're bubbly, you're positive, you're spiritual. You can it's like you can take anything, that you can deal with anything, that because you're positive and you put positive spin on things, they're like, oh, you'll be okay, whatever. Do you find that in your business and in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, always, since like I can even remember, like any human in my life has been like, oh my God, I just want to talk to you and like tell you all my problems.
Yeah.
And, like,
oh my God.
and I'm like, I know I'm that person for everyone. It's okay. And like, I know that I'm an empath, but like, it's exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
And like, people come to you, like even at work, and like, I remember at one of my jobs, everyone would come to my office and talk to me, and everyone would like vent to me and tell me everything, and like, it's a lot to handle, and like. And then, like, if you have a bad day, they're like, oh, you're in a mood. I'm like, am I not allowed to be miserable too?
I know. They're like so shocked. But it's difficult as well, because it's like, hang on a minute. It's like, you're having a bad day. How am I going to survive, And I found myself getting trapped a little bit in this kind of like guru existence, where I was feeling like I've got to shave my head and walk around with my orange bloody thing on because people were coming to me as if like, that I didn't have bad days, and like, oh, well, you're so sorted now, Laura, you know what you're doing, so you can just deal with it. And it's kind of like, sometimes through this pathway you can kind of get trapped into the situation a little bit of being like you say, the people they come to. And I mean, I posted on Instagram the other day, and I was just like, guys, like, and I appreciate you coming to me, but I'm also a person. I found recently, like over the lockdown period, people were just messaging me all the time. I'm having a problem. I'm having a problem. And I was looking at it, and not once were they saying, "Hi, Laura, how are you?" And I was just like, guys, I'm not just a coach. I'm not just an
Right.
empath. Like, I'm a human as well. And I think, like,
Yeah.
when you're an empath, you absorb a lot of energy as well. It can be
You
really
definitely
difficult.
do.
Do you have
Yeah.
any recommendations for you know, what do they say with Reiki? Is there any recommendations with that, or do you have any recommendations for protecting your own sort of spirit self from absorbing too much of other people's energies?
Well, for Reiki, I mean, I always send the person off super grounded. I always do some type of closing grounding exercise, whether with them verbally or just to them at the end of the session. And I just really make sure that they're grounded and protected by that white light. And I
Hmm.
think I have a post on my Instagram as white light protection. It's basically visualizing yourself surrounded by white light. And that white light is not only healing you, but it's also protecting you from outside energies.
Mm.
So that's something that I recommend to my clients. And I also do for myself, especially if I'm having like an off day, you know. I actually come and I sit in my rocking chair, I rock a little
And a
bit.
beautiful rocking chair.
This is my grandmother's, but
Oh, I love it.
I like to come and sit here and kind of feel connected to her. She passed in May, and I was super close with her. So sitting here not only makes me feel grounded, but I also feel connected to her. So this is kind of like my little bubble where I just sit
Mm.
and I do meditations. You know, I do self Reiki on myself here. I do those grounding exercises. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to feel grounded, but I feel like that's something that's super important to like really feel your own feels is by being grounded,
Mm.
and you know, doing exercise where you visualize roots coming out of the bottom of your feet and like
Yeah,
stretching through the earth. Like I feel like that's a really powerful one that really works well for me.
yeah, I do the
I'm
same one.
typically pretty
Interestingly.
grounded. Yeah, yeah. I typically feel pretty grounded though, like just in general as a person. But every now and then you have those days where you're like, oh my God. And you know, just hop in the chair or just lay down and just do one of those visualizations. And like, I just feel like it helps so much.
Mm. And
So
I think
definitely work on that.
it's like easy to integrate as well. Like, I think a lot of people think, like, when you talk about grounding exercises and like working with energy fields and all this sort of stuff, and people are like, "Oh my god," like, and they imagine all this major stuff, and actually, like you say, a lot of it is working with your thoughts. And just, you know,
Yes.
I've got a meditation on my channel where it's just, you know, I call it the loving light meditation, where we go up and we take the light back down, and the same one, we go down and we ground ourselves. And
Yeah.
it's like 15 minutes, and it's just like, you don't need to do anything that's huge to significantly change the way you're feeling, or to kind of root yourself. I mean, I found something that I found as like a spiritual person when I was going through a lot of kind of, because I suffered from really bad anxiety, depression, and huge amounts of trauma. I kind of went through some really bad things that left me with complex post traumatic stress disorder. And during this time, I had a nervous breakdown when I was 15, and then I decided to kind of, during that time, I started to get into spirituality a lot.
Yeah.
And the problem was with me was that I was living up here. I was like in my crown chakra and above for huge amounts of time. And actually, I was describing to people all the time that it was like, because I was feeling so much pain in my physical body, and I was feeling so much pain in my emotional body, that I wasn't living there. And my spirit was kind of like living up here in my crown chakra and up above. And I was always feeling very much like Laura existed in this like a balloon that was kind of off the top of my head, which was a very weird experience, because it was
Yeah.
always
Of
very
course.
much like that I wasn't in my physical. And so because of that, I think I was like that for maybe, I still get there. It's like a disassociation from body.
Right.
But what I recognized was that because of that, I was, you know, I was not looking after my body. I was only looking after like my spirit side, you know, and it was just all this kind of like spirit, spirit, spirit. And I was, you know, I was like very obese when I was like 19. I weighed like nearly about 270 pounds, I think, when I was sort of 19 years of age. So like really, really big girl. And I started to notice that a lot of the reason why was because I was kind of up here all the time, that I wasn't feeling like, I didn't feel whether or not my body felt bad, because my body was where I could kind of wreak the trauma, and then Laura was like living up here.
Right.
Have you ever had experience of that? Because I've never sort of asked anybody that before, but I think it's a weird one, because I think when you talk to people about it who are not spiritual, they're like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know, are you mad? You know, have you ever had like experiences where you've kind of almost come out of your body and you're kind of living like too much in your crown chakra or somewhere else? Have you had an experience like that?
Absolutely. I mean, from like a Reiki perspective, now that, like, if you would have told me that story like a year ago, I would have been like, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. But like, I'm pretty sure like my intuition would have kicked in. I would have been like, okay, like I can see that. But like after like experiencing Reiki and like being familiar with the chakras, I totally get that. I totally feel that. And I feel like I don't think I went through something with like the crown chakra and like the spirit. I think I went through something with like the sacral and the heart. I feel like I was like obsessed with like heart and sacral energies, and I was giving too much to them to the point where they were like overbalanced, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the rest of my chakras were underbalanced, and like that's where I would have definitely needed Reiki in my life, because you know, just focusing on being loved or relationships, like just being too absorbed in, you know, those aspects instead of trying to feed the rest of my body and my chakras and really trying to balance everything out. And, you know, I think at that point in my life, I didn't know, like, I was probably in college or right after college, and I was just obsessed with like all the wrong things, you know, and I feel like I needed balance, and I didn't know what balance was. I didn't know how to find it. So I was just doing whatever felt good to me, you know? So again, those heart chakra feelings and like the sacral, like the creative, like those, I feel like I like overindulged at points versus like finding that balance and being like, okay, like today we need this, and tomorrow we need that, and like it always changes. It's not just one need for one chakra.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any recommendations for people, like, because I do things like chakra meditations and like the mudras and the balancing with like the yam, lam, and ham, like the meditation mantras for chakras. But I mean, do you feel that, how do you balance your chakras? Do you do anything? I mean, you said you did self Reiki, but is there anything for people that maybe aren't attuned, or can they do something can they do self balancing? What do you think?
So I would say if they wanted to do like kind of like a low key chakra balancing, what I like to do with some of my clients who are good with like color visualization, I walk them through each of the chakras, and I have them visualize the color of each chakra, and I encourage them to use their breath to exhale and to make the color spin. So on the exhale, you visualize the color spinning, either counterclockwise or clockwise, doesn't matter. And you do that however many times you feel necessary till it's spinning, not too fast, not too slow, just right. And however you feel it's spinning properly, then you can move on to the next chakra.
Oh, so I like that.
With the red, and then go to your sacral, visualize a ball of orange light. Inhale, exhale, and try to make it spin. And then move to the solar plexus and go to yellow. And I feel like that's something that's easy for people to visualize colors. And it's also relaxing because you're using your breath to motivate, you know, the visualization.
I love that. Yeah, that's a nice one. I like that. Do you ever get so I've done huge amounts of meditation in my life, and I've always found, and I asked a Buddhist monk about this once, because I was doing a 12-day meditation retreat with this Buddhist monk, and it was a silent retreat, and at the end I was like, every time I meditate I feel like I'm gonna throw up. Like, and if I get into this like a long meditation, we were meditating like 12 hours a day.
Oh my goodness.
It was intense, but I get feelings a lot of the time when I'm working with my chakras, or if I'm trying to do, yeah, I think mainly with chakras I get it, but I get feelings of sickness and as if I'm spinning and if the world's kind of spinning out. And I haven't got any inner ear problems, so it's not a physical thing. And I googled this, and somebody said that it was like ascension symptoms, that when
Yeah.
you're going through this process that you can get the physical symptoms.
Yeah.
Have you got, as a Reiki master, do you feel, does any of that kind of ring true for you, or have you ever had experience with that yourself?
Yeah, so definitely during the attunement, that was kind of where I had the most like physical reactions to
Mm,
the energy. Like I didn't quite get nauseous, but more like lightheaded to the point where I was like, where am I?
yeah.
How am I walking? How am I moving? Like very, very lightheaded. And also like dizzy and like almost like an outer body experience,
Hmm.
but to the point where like you're numb to everything that
Yeah,
you're like physically experiencing.
yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of something that I experienced with like the attunement, but like also sometimes when I'm like really deep into meditation and I'm like super relaxed, like almost into the state where like you're dreaming, because I feel like I get like that a lot. I get kind of into like that in between like real world dream state.
Mm,
So I feel like when that happens, sometimes, and not all the time, but sometimes I get like so like I feel light, but I feel like dizzy light. Like my whole
yeah,
body feels like I'm floating, which is super cool. But then like I kind of get like the spinny, like the room spins almost. I'm like,
yeah.
I know my eyes are closed and I know that I'm not moving, but I really feel like I'm spinning.
And I'm glad that's not just me. I haven't, for some reason, I felt the need to mention it there, and I'm glad that it's not just me, because I've
No.
spoken to loads of people, and they're just like, they're like, go and get your ears checked. And like, there's nothing wrong with my ears. It's like, it's not like labyrinthitis where you got like an ear infection or anything, because that's kind of
Right.
like that vertigo feeling. But it's like, it's very bizarre. It can be really off-putting when you're trying to,
Yeah.
because I feel very much that I've got quite an unbalanced root chakra, and I try and do a lot of work on that. But when I'm trying to work on it, I start feeling so sick, and
Mm,
so it's just it stops you from doing the work, and so it's
yeah.
like it's very difficult, because sometimes it's like, should you kind of push through that and fight through that, or is that the sign that maybe you're trying too hard, or it's a
Yeah.
difficult one, and if I've not
Yeah.
kind of,
Definitely tricky.
do you kind of push through it, or do you just kind of think, okay, maybe pull back a little bit on that one? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on like the meditation and like the experience. I feel like sometimes if I'm like not feeling well, I'm like, all right, this is a break. I'm good for now. Like we can come back to this later. And like just again, like being present with your
Yeah.
feeling. And then like other times I'm like, this is gonna pass, like it's gonna be fine, like
Mm.
we're good, like we got this, you
Yeah.
know?
So it's
So
that
I feel
inner
like it kind of
trusting.
depends.
Yeah. I
And
think a
again,
lot of
it's
it.
your intuition.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, it's okay. I was gonna say I feel like it's your intuition. Like
Mm.
if your body's like, no, 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 then you're like, okay, let's take a break. And if
Mm.
your body's like, no, we got this. Like we can like you just I think it's just trust,
Mm.
you know?
I think a lot of the whole pathway is all about kind of trusting yourself, trusting your intuition, and
Yeah.
assuming that it's difficult. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, who was, and I wonder what your opinion is on this, because I didn't really know what to say. Who was quite a staunch Christian, and they were saying to me about about the people that I'm talking to. They say that the spirits that I'm talking to are the demons who are deceiving me, and my experience of everything and everyone that I've ever spoken to, as it were, on in spirit, have always been of light and of kindness, of helping people.
Yeah.
So, and at the time when they said that, I was like, well, it's not my experience, and it's always been for the good of people. And this person said to me, well, of course they're gonna do good at that time, because they're trying to deceive you off the path. And I know that in America, there's quite a lot of kind of very Christian people. It's the same as a
Yep.
Christian country, same within the UK. I
Mhm.
mean, how do you feel about that? If you were asked the same question, do you ever feel like, I mean, how would you answer that question, where people would say that what you're doing is
Yeah.
the people that we're working with are deceivers? How would you think about that?
So I feel like this is super, super relevant to my life because I was brought up in a very strict Catholic family.
Mm.
Actually, my dad is the organist at our church still.
Oh.
Um,
So yeah,
so he's
very,
it's very close to home.
yeah.
But
Spirit is just telling me to ask these questions. They're like, ask her about the demons.
got you covered. um, yeah, I basically grew up in church. Like
Mm,
my parents sing. I mean, I sing as well, and I sing in the choir with them. And I feel like going through this process, like I've encountered multiple people from church that are like totally against anything holistic,
yeah.
anything new age. I mean, I feel like it's kind of like I don't want to say sorcery, but like it's like that bad magic kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
And I even remember at church one Sunday, there was a priest that was doing a homily, like a sermon about how people are buying crystals and believing that they can heal them. And I remember sitting there like, I buy crystals and I know they heal me. And like, I wanted to like stand up and be like, you're wrong, sir. But I'm like,
Just
no,
like
they don't.
tucking your crystals back in, like
Yeah. I'm like, are they still here? Like, are they in my pockets?
yeah, in your bra, yeah.
Yes. I'm like, so like, I know for a fact that like, I mean, a lot of churchgoers, I don't want to say a lot, I don't want to make the assumption, but I feel like there's a good majority of people who are very religious and very faithful that will not believe in this and that
Mm,
will say that what I'm doing is the work of the devil or whatever. Like, I'm sure that there are people out there that disagree with it, but there are people like my dad who has had Reiki and has been like, I don't believe in this, and what is this witchcraft, and blah, blah, blah. But then after session, he has neuropathy in his hands and feet, so he can't feel like his fingers, and like just touching his fingers like this is painful.
oh.
And after one session where he napped the whole time, he wakes up and is like, "Why can I touch my hands?" I'm like, "I did Reiki on you when you were sleeping." Like, what did you do? I'm like, "Well, did it work?" He's like, "I can touch my hands," and I'm like, "So am I a witch?" And he's like, "I don't know what you are, but it worked." And like, so happy. So like, there are people that believe too. Is my point.
Yeah, but I find it interesting because I grew up in the church as well, and and certainly probably more in kind of evangelist churches, and we don't have that the big movement of it over in the UK certainly, but in America you kind of see some evangelist churches where they're feeling the Holy Spirit and people are doing tongues and they're casting out demons and doing kind of healings
Yeah,
on people, and you're kind of like, you're doing Reiki, like you're doing
literally.
Reiki, or you're
Yeah,
casting spells. When I'm watching people doing, I mean, even the Catholic Church, every single time you go to
yeah,
church is a witchcraft ritual to my mind.
exactly.
I watch them with the censer and they're doing with the incense and they're speaking in Latin,
Exactly.
and I'm like, guys, you're witches.
You're literally a witch.
So I'm like sitting there like, what are you talking about? But I do find it difficult because sometimes, like, sometimes I get people who cast aspersions on my path, and I find it difficult not to kind of go back into my Christian root as a child.
Yeah,
And when I was a kid, it scared the hell out of me. I
of
when I
course.
started to get this calling towards this path, I
Yep.
was like, oh my god, like why? And I ignored the pathway. I had a lot of calling towards magic and
Yeah.
witchcraft, and I was like, you can't go there. That's devil worship. And
Right.
then I started to become more attuned, and obviously I was a weirdo anyway, psychic and all these kind of weird things. And when I started to go down the path, I recognized the level of power that the people have. And so I believe that a lot of the reasons why these things were cast out from churches was because people didn't want, the church didn't really want people to be able to have sovereignty. Obviously there
Right.
was a mixture of church and state, originally, where the church was part of the government in effect. So
Right.
but I don't think people kind of want to recognize that. I don't know whether people want to. I think a lot of people who are religious don't really have a relationship with God, like a personal relationship. And like when you're doing Reiki, when you get attuned, you're having that direct, contact with
Right.
God.
Exactly.
And you know, a lot of people don't really want that that connection with God. They want to have a connection with their pastor or with their reverend or their father, and that's how they want to kind of
I
deal
think
with
it's
God.
scary for some people. I definitely think it's scary for some people. And I think that I mean, I have a similar experience where like I feel like I was called to this when I was much younger and I just
Yeah.
didn't know or I didn't want to accept it because of how we were raised. Like
Mm.
this is how you believe, this is what you believe, this is why you believe, and this is it. Like that's all there was. I mean, at least for me. So I feel like it was kind of like tiptoeing towards this path because you're like, I feel like I'm drawn to this and I don't know why. And I don't know if I should be, but I think I'm going to continue. And it's kind of like this weird uneasiness where you're like, I feel like I should be doing this and I don't know if I should be. So I feel like that's kind of like an interesting dynamic. And I still kind of feel, I don't want to say guilty because I have such like radical beliefs now compared to what I was brought up with, like especially with church. I mean, I still go to church, obviously. I still believe in like faith, but I just think that it's such a different perspective once you go through and you learn about the things that we've both experienced and learned. And oh, I wanted to mention this earlier and I totally forgot. So you were saying things about like demons and like what people are telling you. So every experience I've had and every experience that people in this community and industry have had that I've encountered have only had positive experiences with spirits.
Yeah, same.
I've personally never heard of anyone having a negative experience with a spirit.
Recently I've had some I have had a couple of times dark presences in my life that that I've experienced, but I don't feel like it's ever been because of the work that I do. Now I don't know whether that's me being in denial or not, but I believe that that's more that because of bad experiences that I've had in my life that have opened me up to other spirits, if you see what I mean. But I haven't really had any sort of major nothing because of the work that I do. Certainly never when I'm doing work have I ever experienced anything negative.
Of course. Yeah, there's this astrologer that I am like obsessed with. Her name's Jessica Lanyadoo. Have you heard of her?
I haven't, no.
She's an astrologer and a psychic medium and an animal communicator. So I listen to her podcast. I mean, she's one of the reasons why I'm so into astrology because I started listening to her podcast and I was like, oh my God, I want to know more. But she was saying something on her podcast about religion and astrology and kind of comparing the two. And also she brought in like being a psychic medium. And she said that some people say that like when you communicate with spirits, you're communicating with people in hell. And she said, let me just clarify something. I'm paraphrasing here. She said, I've been talking to dead people for the majority of my life, and not once have I heard of a place called hell.
Yeah.
So I just think that's so interesting that like religion has this like hell created for people to fear, but then we have people that do communicate with spirits and that people have passed, and I mean I don't know of any proof of there being such a place, and I think that that's really interesting.
I think that my intuition has always said that hell is actually from my intuition, hell is what people go through on this plane when they don't have a direct link to God. Like when I talk to God, when I'm in connection with God and spirit, my life flows much easier. I get money when I need it from unexpected places. I'm looked after, I'm cared after. For instance, my flat got burgled once and I was in it. and the guy just kind of went past my door and went upstairs and to this other flat. And I was like, well, that's mad. It's just these weird kind of things of protection, or things where, something's happened that I've left my phone, so I've gone back, and then when I've come back down the road, that there's been a car accident. If I hadn't have done that thing, then I would have been in it, and all these kind of weird little things that I've always been protected from. And when I, as I said, I've had a really traumatic time when I was younger, and I have not looked after myself in the slightest when I was younger. I used to do some really reckless behavior, and I've always woken up, which is surprising. So I've always had somebody looking after me, in my corner, protecting me. And when I've gone to people like mediums or psychics or tarot readers, and obviously I do tarot reading myself and I read for other people and the work that I do, I've never ever been given anything that has never helped, that's always helped the person, you know. I've never
Right.
been given any advice or intuition or spiritual guidance that has ever led me down a wrong path. It's always led me to being greater, brighter, happier, and the same for all my clients. And I think sometimes if I can get into a state of questioning and doubting, I can begin to doubt what I'm doing. Like you say, you get these moments of self-doubt of am I doing good? And
Yeah.
and it's like, you've only got to, I don't know about you, but I've only got to read my client testimonies to remember the good
Yeah.
work that's going on, to be able to sit down and see that people are saying like that, this has changed my life. And when I look back to my process with spirit and intuition, it's never taken me down a wrong path. And I think that if we were dealing with something that was deceitful or evil, it would have led us down to a much darker path. Whereas when I wasn't with spirit, when I wasn't listening to spirit, when I wasn't dealing with my intuition, I was going for the things that weren't fruitful. So like you were saying, when you were going more for kind of heart and sacral things, I was going after shit that didn't serve me. And dating people and doing things and doing behavior that was making my life worse. And when I stepped out of that kind of recklessness that for God's protection, certainly it kept me alive in during some of it. And I started to think about listening to that intuition and just going like, okay, spirit, what are we doing today? Like, use me, God, use me. And when I started asking God to use me in his work, its work, and to bring me down pathways, it's always led me to finding the right clients. Like, I've never had a client that wasn't receptive or wasn't kind or wasn't, it's led me to the right people, the right places, and all of those sorts of things. So I think that the proof is in the pudding, as they say. I think that, I think that hopefully that through people like you and me being confident enough to kind of step outside of society and walking our path with hopefully surety, because 95% surety. I mean, we all have our moments, but I hope that it will lead other people to be able to follow suit, because I know that people that I've met along my journey, I'm kind of like, just do what you want to do. Do what, if you're being drawn towards something, just try it. What's the worst that can happen? I mean, what would be? Have you got kind of like a great success story in your life, either from your personal life or a client that you've worked with, that can kind of say how wonderful the journey is with spirit rather than without?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, just a side note, see a difference in my life and my mood and even my emotional state now compared to 5 years ago. I feel like, those positive affirmations and meditations, like, they really do change who you are, like, fundamentally, and they really change your life and your perspective. So I feel like once those things change, like, your life's on track regardless, and like when you have those things, like, you can't go wrong. So I definitely feel like that's just been a gift. But I feel like a success story, I think I'd probably have to say two ones that pop out at me the most. One, I have a client that I've been giving Reiki to, and she recently decided to get attuned to be Reiki practitioner as well. And that to me was like so, like, I don't know, it was just so like heartwarming. I was like, oh my God, like, my healing helped you realize that you want to do this too. Like,
So welcome to the club.
Yeah, like, so amazing. And like we said, like, if anything, we need more healers in this world, and we need more light workers. And the fact that she went out on her own and she's like, I'm just called to do this. And she's like, it was because of you. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Well, you might have another success story, because I've been thinking about it for a while about, well, I'll go and get tuned, and I've been thinking about it. I think I will go and do it now after what you said. I'd be really interested to go and see and integrate it into my practice as well. So, I think I'll have to touch you and be like, Dana, I did it.
Yes, let me know. Let me know. That's so, so exciting. Especially if you're being called to it, then, I mean, there's no way you can go wrong.
Mm. Well, it's a question. I've seen a lot of these like Reiki attunements on YouTube and stuff like that. What's your opinion on those? Because I'm kind of like, how can that work? I know people are going like, if I'm giving something like advice or something through a TV screen, that makes sense. Do you think that people can do Reiki through YouTube? If people if watchers want to go and YouTube it and see whether they can have a treatment, does that work?
I have a couple thoughts on this because I've been given Reiki distally and I can give Reiki distally. So I could see how it could work through YouTube, but I feel like at least when I do distal Reiki, what I like to do is imagine the person that I'm working on.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't know how I feel about people giving it out like through YouTube. I understand the concept of how it would work, but I don't understand how it could personally help the person without visualizing them, if that makes sense. I don't know. I mean, I don't really dive deep into the YouTube world when it comes to Reiki things. I mean, I've met so many amazing people through Instagram and the Instagram community with like Reiki and tarot cards and card readings and astrology. Like the amount of people that I've met just there has been overwhelming with love and support. So like I feel like the people that I meet there, if they're offering distance Reiki, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's trade, But I don't know if I would go with someone on YouTube, to be honest.
No, my feeling was just like, that's a crock. That's not gonna work. Like, I don't know why. But I wondered, like, I was interested if I was just being like skeptical, and you were gonna go, no, it's gonna work.
I mean, I could be wrong, and maybe they are giving amazing Reiki through YouTube, but I feel like you should probably find someone that you met on Instagram or Facebook and just actually speak to the person and maybe make some type of connection with them. Be like, hey,
yeah,
Reiki, because
I'm going to include you, so I'll put, for anybody watching, I'll put Dana's details below, so you can contact her through her Instagram to have a look at her site, which is always full of really, really good stuff, very positive. Obviously, we're friends, and we keep kind of sharing each other stuff. Like, oh my god! Like the other day, I think we shared something at the same time. I was like, no way, that's just weird. But it's like, it is weird, I think, and it's a sign for like actually the downloads that people get from spirit is like when we have a crossover like that and you post the same post at the same time, and it's just like, that's mind-boggling. It's like that intuition from, because it is like somebody just going, oh, you need to go and tell the people about that. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, tell the people about that. And then I'm like, hang on a minute, did you just speak to spirit? We're talking to the same guy. But yeah.
That happens all the time, especially with people that you connect with. Like you're on the same wavelength, you get the same messages, and like that day, I think we posted 2 things back to back, like the same concept. I'm like, what's happening here?
But this is the beauty. I mean, this is why I said, come on the podcast, because I think the beauty of it, when people kind of get into the path, because a lot of people that I meet, they're maybe kind of fresh, they're like new to the life of spiritualism, and kind of dealing with spirit. When I talk to them about stuff, I kind of do it in a way that doesn't scare the hell out of them, and I do it kind of like baby spiritualism for people that are just kind of coming in, and I just sort of say to them, like, we're all in connection with this thing. And I think that a lot of people go, well, how can I get more connected? How can I talk to spirit? And it's just listen, start to listen and start to trust that inner gut. And I think I can really quite clearly determine between stuff that Laura knows and stuff that's this other person that knows everything. And it's like, it's like I've had this all my life. Like when I was a kid, I think people were just like, she's a genius. And it's like, no, that is the thing over there that's like connected to everything and everyone, because the capability to know stuff, places that you've never been before, recipes, a knowledge of things of historical processes and all sorts of stuff. And you're like, I haven't read that anywhere. Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird, I know. It's like, I just know things, but you're a good dinner guest.
That's exactly what happens all the time. Especially, I mean, I was talking to my therapist about this, and she was like, so I just know things sometimes. And I'm like, wait, me too. And so we're like having a conversation about, I don't even remember, incense or essential oils. And she's like, so I know this incense does this, but I don't know how I know this or why I know this, but I feel like I need to share it with you. And I was like, oh yeah, and then this one is similar and it does this. And she's like, how'd you know that? And I said, I don't know. It just
Mm.
popped in my head.
And I think there is that of just trusting it, because I know when I'm talking to people, or I'm doing, I'm doing work with clients, and I do a lot of stuff. But we're in pandemic, so I'm doing a lot of my stuff through video calls at the moment. But I see things in them, and it's like something just goes, ask about the thing, and you're
Yes.
like,
Yeah. You're like,
okay. And you ask, and I have to say to my clients, like, in my welcome email, I'm like, sometimes it can see quite probing or confrontational, because you're like, where the hell did that come from? And generally
right.
it's the thing that they don't want to talk about. Like, I had a client recently, he was like, no, I'm not doing that, I don't want to talk about that. And as soon as he kind of shut down, I was like, bitch, that's the thing we're dealing with. It's like, that's the thing, that's the thing. And I was like, mate, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry about this. This is they're telling me to ask this really awkward question, and it was the
Yeah.
thing that he needed to work on. And actually, when we broke the valve on that thing that he didn't want to deal with, actually, like, so much growth happened. But
Yep.
it's really interesting of like having to trust that process of
Oh yeah.
trusting it, whatever it is,
Absolutely.
and it is a weird
Uh-huh.
relationship, because you to know somebody so to know something so personally, and yet to not know
Yeah.
it at all,
Yeah.
into a point where you can't even describe it, is
Right.
very, it's like, no wonder people think we're a bit mad.
Yes, I know. I have that experience often with Reiki because you're tapping into such an intimate source of
Mm,
energy for them. I mean, I mean, I'm sure you experience this too. Like you just know stuff about people, and like you just know what to work on, or where to go, or what to ask, or things like messages pop up. And I mean, I know I'm hesitant a lot of the times. I'm like, oh, this is awkward, or like,
mm,
oh, should I say this? Or like, I don't want to hurt their feelings. Like, especially if like a spirit pops up, I'm like, there's this man in the room with us. I'm not sure who he is. Like, you don't want to scare the person. So I always like to ask my clients or anyone I'm talking to, like ahead of time, I'm like, if something comes up, like, are you cool with me sharing?
yeah,
And like, I feel like that's like communicating is like super important with people because
yeah,
you're like, are you good if like someone from your past like pops up in like a reading? Or like, are you okay if I see something and it's uncomfortable? I mean, 9 times out of 10, they're like, tell me everything. But there is that one time where like someone's like, I don't want to know anything about my past. I'm like, okay, cool. We'll just sit here and chill.
yeah. And like, what are your thoughts on? Recently there's a lot of like new stuff that people are coming out with, like things like the Akashic records and past lives and all that sort of stuff. What's the thought about that with Reiki? Do you
Yeah.
think, do you deal with past lives and things within Reiki, or?
Yes, absolutely. So, one of the attunements actually has to do with past life relationships and past lives. So, when you recite those attunements and those symbols, and when you activate those symbols,
Mm,
you're activating your past life. So, with Reiki, things that are imbalanced, maybe from a past life, comes through in this life, and that's how we kind of know what to work on,
yeah,
at least from my experience. And I think it's really interesting because, and I don't know much about past lives, and that's something that's always intrigued me. I'd love to do like a regression with someone. Like
yeah.
I'm very, very interested in them and like that whole process. I lost my train of thought, but
You're talking about the
I would,
Akashic records and past lives within Reiki.
yeah, yeah, I would like love to learn about that. And I feel like with Reiki, found it. I feel like with Reiki, the things that are imbalanced in this life were balanced in your past life, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. I
totally.
feel like we're like the reverse of
Yeah,
ourselves. Yeah.
that's amazing. So recently I had something that Spirit was just like, North Node. You need to look into your North Node, right? And I was
Mhm.
like totally into my in
Right.
astrology. So I started to look into my North Nodes, and what that is talking about the same thing, about that your South Node and your North Node. So your North Node represents where you should be working on in this life,
Yeah.
and your South Node represents your past lives and your karmic
Mhm.
cycles from there. And like you say, what you were in a past life is the thing, the opposite of that is what you need to be working on in this
Yeah.
life. So I just started looking into all my stuff with my North Node and my South Node. And my North Node's in Aries, and my South is in Libra. And in Libra, it talks about that. It talks quite about heavy codependency, about being the person that supports everyone to go off and do their journeys and live their lives. And then, you know, I started to look into this, and for the Aries of my North Node in this life, that I'm supposed to be kind of being the brave frontier and focusing on myself and pleasing myself.
Yeah.
And for the first 20 years of my life, I was so the back, you know, the opposite of that. I was very much the codependent, sorting everybody else's lives out, the supporting act.
Yeah.
And recently I kind of just looked into this, and I was like, holy shit, this stuff is so on point.
Yes.
And this is the stuff that I find, like, when you look into these things, it's so on point. How can it not be real? It's like, you know, I'm an air sign. All the people that I've loved in my life are my fire signs, and you know, are like diametrically opposed to each other.
I've talked about this before.
You know, and it's so clear. It's so clear that all this stuff means something and it makes sense. It's like, I don't know how people can poo-poo it. But if you haven't looked into your North Nodes and stuff, like, you know, Cafe Astrology or somewhere, go and get your, you know, your natal charts for free. And people listening, you know, go and get you can go into cafeastrology.com. You can get your natal chart, which is like your astrology chart for where the stars and things were. For when you were born, and have a look at your North Node and your South Node. It's so interesting. But looking at what you were saying about, like, Reiki wise, what you were bad at in your past life, you need to be good at here, and then vice versa. It's like, that's backed up by the astrology stuff. So totally. It's like, just mad.
I know. I remember the first time I looked into my birth chart and like did like the whole printout on Cafe Astrology, the whole 30 pages of it, because it's so long.
It is.
And
it's really in depth.
Reading it and being like, oh, that's right. And I was like, wait, that's literally me. And then I'm like, wait, how do you know that about me? Like, I don't even know that about me, but you do. Like,
yeah, but I think, like, going back to kind of the Christianity thing, where it says about God knowing every one of his children, you know, and knowing them in depth, and knowing them from the second that you have been created, and this, you know. And I think that when you look at things like astrology, it's like spirit, the universe, it knows you. It knows you inside out. It's like that is your DNA of who you are and who you're going to be. And it can be really helpful to go and have a look at those things and kind of recognize who you are through the stars a little bit, because it is so apt and it is so bizarre. It's as if somebody has been watching you for years and has written this stuff down, you know?
Yeah, no.
So,
awesome.
Oh, wait, I could talk to you for hours, but, you know, I'm sure the listeners are kind of like, okay, wrap it up.
Sorry.
But, you know, it's been absolutely amazing to talk to you, Dana. I'm losing the light as well, so I'm going to be in pitch black in a minute. It's turning 6. What time is it now? It's like about 4:20 here, but the sun sets at about 4 o'clock, so we're at the other side of the sun for you. But it's been absolutely amazing to talk to you. And, like, guys, if anybody that wants to get in touch with Dana, I'll put all of her details down below. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon, Dana. So perhaps I can have you on again, and we can talk a little bit more about some other things.
Anytime you want.
Absolutely adorable to speak to you. It's lovely to talk, and thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Of course.